In 1984, something utterly bizarre suddenly unfolded at a house in Chester, in the northwest of England. It all started with the homeowner, Ken Webster, noticing that objects around the house were mysteriously being moved or even vanishing into thin air. As time went on, these eerie events started happening more and more frequently. Chairs in the living room were stacked in bizarre, impossible ways. Strange, incomprehensible messages appeared scrawled on the floor. And then there were the unexplained footsteps echoing through the house. These chilling signs drove the family to the brink of frustration and fear. They even began to suspect the house was haunted by ghosts. But the truth was far stranger. As these weird occurrences escalated, the homeowner started receiving mysterious messages. And these enigmatic notes came from someone who lived in the same house back in 1521. Could this possibly be real? Today, let's dive into the most shocking vertical time travel event of the last century. In 1989, a book quietly hit the shelves titled The Vertical Plane: Mysteries from the Dawdleston Messages. In this book, the author, Ken Webster, boldly declared to the world that about 4 or 5 years earlier, he had somehow broken through the barriers of time and space and made contact with people from the 16th century. During this process, he even accidentally encountered someone from the future, in the year 2109. Honestly, at first, hardly anyone believed the book. But as investigators got involved, the whole story grew even more mind-bending, because through rigorous investigations, people discovered that this might actually be true. And it all traces back to events from 39 years ago. Ken Webster was an economics teacher at Hawarden High School. In 1984, Ken and his girlfriend Debbie moved to Dawdleston, near Chester, England. There, they found an old farmhouse built in the 18th century. Since the place was quite ancient, Ken and Debbie decided to renovate it themselves. Everything went smoothly at first, but as the project neared completion, the strange events began. One morning, their housemate Nick was the first to spot dirty six-toed footprints on the freshly cleaned ground floor. The footprints stretched from the living room to the kitchen, and eventually even climbed up the walls to the ceiling. Seeing this bizarre sight, Nick immediately called Ken and Debbie downstairs. The three of them stared at the footprints on the wall and burst out laughing, because they figured these marks must be a prank from friends who had helped with the renovations the day before. Even though the friends denied it, who else could it be? So chalking it up to bad luck, they grabbed a mop and cleaned up the dirty footprints. The very next morning, the mysterious footprints appeared again. And it wasn't just the footprints this time. 2 days later, a sudden scream echoed from the kitchen. It was Debbie, who had gotten up early and gone to the kitchen, only to discover that someone had taken kitchen utensils and stacked them into a precarious 4-foot tower. And just like the footprints, no matter how much they cleaned up, the next morning, the towering stack would reappear. During this time, the three housemates began to suspect one another, wondering if someone was playing an elaborate prank. But this theory was quickly debunked. One evening, the trio went out for dinner together, and in just over an hour, something strange happened in the house again. Could someone have broken into their home? A creeping sense of unease began to envelop them. From then on, before going to bed or leaving the house, the three made it a point to check that all doors were securely locked. Yet the bizarre incidents continued unabated, and they only grew more intense. In December 1984, their housemate Nick left to spend a joyful Christmas Eve with his family. Meanwhile, Ken decided to put the strange pranks aside and enjoy a romantic evening with Debbie. It sounded like the perfect plan. The couple had a delightful evening at a restaurant, returning home in high spirits after dinner. But the moment they opened the door, Ken and Debbie were struck dumb with horror at the sight before them. The sofa, which had been neatly arranged in the living room, was now part of a towering 6-foot structure, interspersed with smaller household items from the living room. Even the bicycle left outside had been dragged indoors. The couple stood frozen, utterly speechless. It wasn't until several seconds later that Ken snapped out of it. He rushed into the living room, grabbed the phone, and called the police. It wasn't long before the police arrived at Ken's house. But after a thorough investigation, the police found no signs of anyone breaking into the house. Even the neighbors confirmed that they hadn't seen any suspicious strangers that night. If no one had broken in, then who was responsible for the bizarre prank before their eyes? What Ken could never have anticipated was that 3 days after this incident, his computer unexpectedly received a mysterious message. In 1981, a computer called the BBC Micro was released. It retailed for £235, equivalent to about 40 million VND today. Safe to say, it wasn't cheap. Our protagonist, Ken, happened to own one of these BBC Micro computers. Ken explained that, for work purposes, he had borrowed a computer from the school to use at home when needed. He was certain he always turned the computer off after using it. But strangely enough, one evening, when he returned home from work, he found the computer powered on. Even more bizarre, there was a new file on the screen labeled Reate. Curiosity piqued. He opened the file and discovered it was a letter. The letter read, "I write on behalf of many. I must confess, though my learning is not great, you speak in a most peculiar manner. You are a gentleman, yet you keep a fanciful lass as your companion, living in my house. I mean you no fright, for since that fool tore down my bounds, I have seen many changes. This is a fitting place, with lights and costly devilish contraptions. Only my friend Edmund Gray or the king himself could afford such things. Stealing my home is a grave crime, L.W." According to Ken, he was completely baffled by the letter's contents. Not only was the language oddly archaic, but it also referenced things that made no sense. So Ken copied the letter's contents and brought it to his close friend Peter Tinder at school. Ken figured that Peter, a literature teacher, might be able to decipher the meaning behind the strange message. Sure enough, that afternoon, after reading the letter's contents, Peter left a note that read, "Good heavens, if this is a prank, they've executed it flawlessly. The way this man writes doesn't belong to our time. It's the archaic phrasing of the 16th or 17th century. What he's essentially trying to say is, he's very unhappy that you're living in his house." Hearing this, Ken didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He was almost impressed by the audacity of whoever was pulling this prank. This person had not only gone to great lengths to mess with his house, but had also used ancient language to write a letter. But the real question was, would someone actually go to such lengths just to mess with someone like this? Or could it be that everything happening wasn't a prank at all, but the result of a genuine haunting in the house? Seeing Ken sink into worry and confusion, Peter, on the other hand, was utterly fascinated. He found the whole situation incredibly intriguing. He even started convincing Ken, "Why don't we write a letter back to LW?" That day, Peter eagerly visited Ken's house. Together, they brainstormed how to communicate with this ancient ghost. Perhaps influenced by Peter's enthusiasm, Ken and Debbie began to feel less gloomy. Debbie, too, started to lighten up, even growing excited at the prospect of a response from the ghost. So, after pooling everyone's ideas, they finally composed their first letter. "Dear LW, thank you for your message. We're very sorry for disturbing you. May we ask, do you live in Dawdleston in the 17th century? Is your King James or Charles Stuart? Would you like to know anything about us? Thank you for your message, Ken." To avoid interfering with LW's response, after writing the letter, Ken and Debbie deliberately left the house for the night. Sure enough, when they returned the next day, a new letter had appeared on the computer. However, this reply contained some garbled characters, but with Peter's help, they successfully deciphered the meaning of the letter. The letter read, "You should have told me of your time rather than asking of mine. Yet I am willing to show good faith first. My current king is Henry VIII, who is 46 years old. Yet I greatly admire this King James you speak of, 28th March, 1521. There was no doubt about it. Ken was thrilled to receive LW's reply. He shared it with Peter, who noticed that LW referred to King Henry VIII as being 46 years old. This phrasing perfectly matched the way people spoke in LW's time, rather than the modern way of saying 46. But at the same time, Peter spotted some puzzling details. First, LW specifically noted the letter was written on March 28, 1521. However, in 1521, King Henry VIII wasn't 46, he was 32. The second issue, LW claimed the ruler of his time was King Henry VIII, yet he expressed admiration for King James. The problem? King James didn't take the throne until 1567. In other words, LW, living in 1521, couldn't possibly know that James would become king in the future. Most crucially, if LW was a ghost, how could he possibly be using a computer? With so many mysteries surrounding this situation, Ken and the others decided to write another letter. "Dear LW, it's 1985 here in Dawdleston. My name's Ken Webster, and I'm a teacher. I often cross the Aldford Bridge over the River Dee. In your time, that bridge must already be built, right? Have you ever used it? Also, you mentioned that we're living in your house, but as far as I know, this house was built in the 18th century. The year 1521 doesn't even exist yet in your time, so how can you claim we're in your house? Can you tell us more about your story?" 2 hours later, Ken received a reply. "My good friend, can you explain why you're asking me questions that make no sense to me? As far as I'm concerned, you're the one living in my house. If you can't explain why you're in my home, then I'm afraid I can't help you. Right now, I'm all alone, with no family left. Not long ago, my wife fell victim to the plague. God took her soul, along with our unborn child. Indeed, I often cross the Aldford Bridge. My farm is simple, but it sits on a beautiful piece of land. The house is built on a foundation of Lucas Wainman red stone. Based on Ken's perspective, after receiving this letter, they became even more convinced that LW was a fraud. Because in this letter, Ken had set a trap. He deliberately mentioned crossing the old Aldford Bridge and even asked LW if he had ever used it. LW's answer? Yes. But here's the catch. In 1521, there was no bridge over the river. And that's not the only red flag. In this letter, LW revealed his full name, Lucas Wainman, but in Dodleston's local records, there's no trace of anyone by that name. Even more significant, Ken knew full well that his house wasn't built on a red stone foundation. But just when Ken was ready to dismiss Lucas entirely, something strange happened in the kitchen. To fix an issue, engineers had to lift the kitchen floor. And there it was, a red stone foundation. It turned out Ken's house was built on the remnants of an older structure. But here's the kicker. Even Ken didn't know about this. So how could Lucas possibly know? While Ken was still reeling from this mystery, his computer suddenly received a desperate plea for help. After the discovery of the Redstone Foundation, Ken and his close friend Peter grew even more curious about Lucas. Whenever they had a spare moment, Ken would sit at his computer, typing letters to Lucas. The two seemed to become close friends, sharing everything. And Lucas started replying faster and faster, often responding within just 1 or 2 hours. The details in the messages perfectly matched life in the 16th century. On this point, Peter told the media that this was almost proof the whole thing wasn't someone's prank. Because mimicking the speech of someone from centuries past would take serious time and effort. In the days that followed, Ken realized Lucas was quite the talker. He often shared vivid stories about how people lived in the 16th century. One day, curiosity got the better of Ken and he asked, "Don't you want to know how we live?" Lucas replied, "Why would I need to ask you? I can see you all directly." And well, it made sense. Lucas was a ghost after all. Of course he could see them. Why bother asking questions? At this thought, Ken couldn't help but let out an awkward chuckle. Little did he know that after this conversation, Lucas would suddenly vanish. During that time, Ken noticed something odd. Sometimes he'd clearly see a new file pop up on his computer, but strangely, when he opened it, the message inside would disappear instantly. It wasn't until a week later that Ken finally received a new message. The message read, "I am a friend of Lucas. You're a foolish wretch bringing a cursed fate upon Lucas. I hope he comes to no harm. Right now, he's locked away in a shameful prison. Unless you help Lucas, he will die. If you reveal your true face before the king and show your wicked powers, then perhaps Lucas's life can be spared." According to Ken, when he read this letter, he was stunned, speechless. His mind raced, trying to make sense of it all. Lucas was in prison? Wasn't he a ghost? How could a ghost be locked up? Who was this person writing to me? And why were they telling me to save Lucas? With his head full of questions, Ken quickly wrote a reply. What exactly is going on? Can you have Lucas answer my letters and tell me why he's in prison? Not long after, Ken received a response. The letter explained that Lucas was currently in prison and couldn't reply himself. As for why he was locked up, he'd been accused of practicing witchcraft. Someone had reported Lucas for often sitting in his house, talking to a glowing green box. And at that moment, Lucas's friend was using the same glowing box to beg Ken for help. By this point, Ken, Debbie, and Peter were absolutely floored, because according to the letter's sender, Lucas was not only not a ghost, he even had his own computer. In other words, all this time, they'd been chatting through a computer with someone from 400 years ago. This wasn't just a question of logic anymore. It was way beyond that. Their instincts screamed that if they didn't act fast, Lucas could very well face execution. After all, in the 16th century, practicing magic meant a death sentence. Given the emergency, Peter rushed straight to Ken's house after getting the news. The three friends pulled an all-nighter, brainstorming ways to save Lucas. At first, they figured the most direct and effective approach was to learn Lucas's real name. Because from their earlier conversations, Ken had realized Lucas wasn't his actual name. That's why they couldn't find any records. But whenever the topic of his real name came up, Lucas dodged it. So the trio wrote a letter to Lucas's friend, explaining that if they knew his true name, they could research Lucas's future and figure out a plan to rescue him. But for some reason, Lucas's friend refused to reveal his true name. Tragically, 2 days later, Ken received a farewell letter from Lucas. It read, "I am Lucas's friend. Below are the words Lucas wanted to share. Dear Ken, this may be the last letter I ever write to you. I know you have so many questions for me, but I won't have the chance to explain. Tomorrow is the day of my execution. I hope that in the future you'll publish a book telling our story, so people can see the folly of their ways. Farewell, my true friend. May your God welcome you with open arms, and may Oxford stand forever. There's no doubt that after receiving this farewell letter, Ken was frantic. So, after a sleepless night of discussion, Ken decided to take a bold risk. After their all-night brainstorming, Ken came up with a plan. He instructed Lucas's friend to deliver a letter to the sheriff holding Lucas. It had to reach the hands of the authorities. It dawned on them that this was a threatening letter, a clever, desperate move born of urgency. Ken decided to turn the tables and tell the sheriff they weren't demons, but they held a powerful force in their hands. If Lucas were to die, the consequences would be unimaginable. Thankfully, the plan actually worked. A few days later, Ken received a reply from Lucas. Dear friends, thank you for your help. I am safe now. Thomas Harden. That's right. In this letter confirming his safety, Lucas finally revealed his true name. And through verification, they confirmed that a man named Thomas Harden did indeed exist. Even more astonishing, in 1530, he became a scholar at Brasenose College. But it wasn't just about revealing his true name. Lucas, or rather Thomas, went further, sharing details about the glowing box. He wrote, "The first time you told me you were from 1985, I was shocked. I thought you were from 21109, like the person who gave me the glowing box. About 6 months ago, I kept noticing signs that things in my house had been moved. Then, not long after, a strange glowing box appeared in my home. At first, I had no idea what the box was for. It wasn't until I read messages on the glowing box that I understood. These messages came from a group claiming to be from 2109. I can't say much about that part. Not long after their messages appeared, I started seeing all sorts of visions. The glowing box showed images, some from the past, others from the future, and you all appeared in those visions. It finally hit me. Lucas wasn't a ghost after all, and somehow, beyond communicating with Ken in 1985, he was also in contact with people from the future, 2109. He even got his computer from them. The key point? The technology of Lucas's computer might actually surpass the computers Ken had in 1985, because Lucas's machine could even glimpse the future. This flood of information nearly made Ken pass out. That night, Ken couldn't sleep a wink. He kept thinking, if Lucas wasn't a ghost, then who or what had been haunting his house? Could it be someone from 2109? Wait a second. If Lucas could contact people in 2109, maybe I could too? With that thought, Ken leapt out of bed, fired up his computer, and typed a simple message, "Call 2109. Not long after, Ken got a response. "Ken, we're very sorry, but from 2109, we can only offer you 2 choices. 1, you can try to make sense of your situation on your own, but be warned, your actions could alter history. 2, follow our guidance and complete your mission. Remember, we serve the same God, whoever he may be. We know you've discovered Lucas's true name, and that's a serious issue. We in 2109 will handle it. Do you realize how critical this letter is?" In this letter, Ken not only confirmed he was communicating in 2 directions, with both the distant past and the future, he also realized something else. The people from 2109 had been monitoring his conversations with Lucas all along, and for some reason, they seemed unhappy that Ken had uncovered Lucas's true name. No wonder Lucas had always avoided revealing his real identity. This situation had spiraled far beyond Ken's expectations. So, Ken decided to seek help from the Society for Psychical Research, SPR. This organization, founded in 1882, specializes in studying psychic phenomena and the supernatural. After receiving Ken's report, the SPR immediately sent 2 investigators, David Welch and John Bucknell, to the old manor to investigate. After reviewing the situation, investigator David decided to first verify the authenticity of the events. Using Ken's BBC computer, he sent 10 questions to 2109 and deleted them after 10 minutes. A day later, they received a reply that read, "David, you've disrupted our communication. Next time you conduct your little experiment, please think carefully. Yes, we are indeed the tachyon universe you speak of, but your understanding of the tachyon universe is incorrect. We are moving forward at incredible speeds, covering every point in time and space." When the investigator received this reply, he was utterly shocked, because from start to finish, only he knew the contents of those 10 questions, and 2109 had responded, pointing out exactly what was correct or incorrect. This made one thing clear. Ken wasn't trying to pull a fast one on anyone. But that's not all. 2109 even admitted they were operating within a tachyon universe. So what exactly is a tachyon universe? In 1905, Einstein published his theory of relativity, which stated that in a vacuum, no object's speed can exceed the speed of light. But in 1967, Professor Gerald Feinberg from Columbia University proposed a radically different hypothesis. He suggested that the universe contains particles that travel faster than light, called tachyons. The more energy a tachyon absorbs, the slower it moves, a concept that completely defies the physics of our universe. In our universe, an object at rest has the least energy. It only starts moving once it gains energy, and the more energy it gains, the faster it moves. Since the tachyon universe completely contradicts the laws of physics as we know them, some believe the tachyon universe operates under the physics of a parallel universe. If parallel universes are real, then the universe they inhabit might be entirely different from ours. The key point? According to 2109, they are indeed living in the tachyon universe. This seems to indirectly confirm the existence of a parallel universe. No wonder some of Lucas's early messages contained historical discrepancies. These inconsistencies were likely caused by the parallel universe. Notably, in the reply from 2109, they specifically mentioned that they are moving forward at incredible speeds. Could the parallel universe operate at an accelerated pace? In his book, Ken noted that he believed 2109 might be from another dimension entirely. In 1985, after more than a year of interaction, 2109 announced they were about to leave. As for Lucas, after being accused of witchcraft due to a neighbor's betrayal, he ultimately decided to move away. And so this extraordinary encounter across 3 timelines came to an end. I bet what everyone wants to know most by now is whether this whole story is real or fake. Although Ken's close friend Peter insisted that Lucas's way of speaking perfectly matched the 16th century, other literary scholars have a different take. Laura Wright, a linguist from Cambridge University, pointed out that some sentences in Lucas's letters contained verb tense errors. However, compared to these minor linguistic issues, the evidence supporting the authenticity of this entire affair is far more substantial. For example, Ken once asked 2109, "What's the solution to Fermat's last theorem?" This problem had stumped scholars for 300 years at the time. And in their reply, 2109 clearly stated that the theorem would be solved within Ken's lifetime. Incredibly, just 6 years after the book was published, mathematician Andrew Wiles and his student Richard Taylor successfully proved Fermat's last theorem. Not only did 2109 accurately predict the theorem's resolution, but through Google, we also found records of the sheriff who arrested Lucas, Thomas Falhurst. He was a nobleman living in Chester during the reign of King Henry VIII. Although some argue that the existence of Lucas and the sheriff isn't enough to prove the book's story is true, since the author could have researched these details beforehand. Others who support the story argue, if the book was entirely fabricated, why didn't the author claim to have met Queen Elizabeth I or Queen Victoria for a more sensational tale? Instead, he described meeting an obscure figure named Lucas. What's more intriguing is that 2109 made a strange request of Ken. They asked him to track down a UFO investigator named Gary M. Rowe. Not only did this UFO investigator visit Ken's house, he even used the computer to communicate directly with 2109. Unfortunately, the UFO investigator never revealed to Ken the details of their conversation. What secrets did that exchange hold? Here comes the big moment. Later, the UFO investigator publicly confirmed the events. He even made a call to the world. I know many people doubt this book, but I don't. I believe this is the first recorded case of computer-based psychic communication in history. Time will prove that everything in this book is true. It seems some mysteries still need time to unravel. But I have to say, this book made me think of a future figure, KFK. He once said his method of time travel is unlike anything modern humans understand. He called himself a time observer. Could it be that 2109 are time observers too? Or are they carrying out some secret mission to alter history? I'd love to hear your thoughts. Let's discuss. The world is still full of countless mysteries. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel to explore more in the next video. Thanks for watching.